Today's Dolly Transformations is going to be on this Mego Farrah Fawcett doll. So I've actually had her since July of 2024, and I'm filming this in January of 2025. Normally it would not take me so long to work on a doll. She has been cleaned, which I'll explain more in a minute. But I just have been so busy. We had just a lot of things going on, and I knew I was going to need to reroot her, and it just kind of kept getting pushed off. But now that I am done my main project of reshooting all of my Flickr photos, which you can see some of my brats behind me, all these shelves have been rearranged, and all of my dolls, all of them, have been photographed, clothes, bodies, faces, etc. All those pictures are updated, so now that that's done, we can work on Farrah. I promised her, I had not forgotten. The reason why I wanted to make this transformation video, she has already been cleaned. I cleaned her in July when I got her at the flea market. She was in a little bundle deal with a Charlie's Angels doll and a Beauty Secrets Barbie. They were $5 for the three of them, and she does have her outfit. I cleaned her, and she had pretty nice hair at the time, but something that happens with these Mego dolls is their hair does weird things in hot water. So traditionally I boil wash my dolls, and I didn't think anything of it. I just plopped her into the bowl. I was doing like a whole group of dolls, and when I went to comb her out, all of her hair had, like, it looked like it burned. I'll show you a close-up after, but it looked like it had burned, and I kind of panicked because, you know, I was so excited about having this doll and I thought I had ruined her. But upon closer inspection, when a doll burns, if you melt the hair, it's very distinctive. I know because I used to do this a few times as a kid. I blow dried them, and you could see the hair like burn, and it's hard and it's crunchy. This is more like what happens when you put Kanekalon haired dolls in the boil wash, where it kind of like balls up. However, this is an extreme case of it. It shrank up inside her head, so I was able to smooth the slightly longer parts back out. However, I can't get what's like balled up in her head out. Like, it didn't work. I like dipped her back in the water and combed out what I could, but this isn't gonna work. And honestly, it's kind of an ugly color, so we're gonna reroot her today. I didn't buy any special hair. I'm using leftovers from other projects. So I just thought I'd make this in case you have a Mego doll from this era. I'm not sure what like this hair fiber is called. I mean, normally I would look at it and be like, oh, it's some kind of nylon, but it responded really weird, and this doll was marketed where you could use like heat tools on her, so I don't know if it's like some kind of like magic hair. Anything like that can respond really strangely to heat, like in a different way. So like my Forever Hair Ariel is meant to have hair you can like crimp and curl with just like a plastic non-heated device, and her hair is very sensitive in the boil wash, and if you try to flat iron it, it will burn. I don't know, maybe it has something to do with that. But if you have Mego dolls, don't boil wash them in really hot water. Let it cool off, and you know, maybe test a small piece and see what happens. My mistake was that it was piping hot. It came right out of the kettle, and I just let her sit there for a minute, not thinking anything of it. So unfortunately there's no going back. She's gonna get rerooted, and if you have this issue, you can reroot them. Again, it did not burn. I want to clarify that this hair did not burn. It has just shrunk extremely inside her head. So without further ado, I'm going to show you how I reroot her. Alright, so let's start off with what I'm going to use to reroot her. I almost always exclusively reroot with saran, because it's just my favorite fiber, and I think it's easiest to reroot with because the hair clumps together nicely. So this is all stuff that I've bought a long time ago. We have Platinum Saran, we have Malibu Saran, and we have some Ash Blonde, which is left over from one of Colleen's vintage skippers, her bendable leg that I rerooted. So you can see, like, this is the original packaging. All of this hair was from restoredoll.com. It is where I almost always go for doll hair. I think I've only bought hair from dollyhair.com one or two other times, and I just prefer Restore Doll. She ships really quickly, and one time when I ordered this Platinum Blonde, she forgot to send me one skein because it comes in sets of 2, and was really quick to respond to the email and send me the replacement hair. So that's what I'm using. It's not like all the same blonde, so this is more of like a golden blonde. This is obviously platinum and this is ashy. So I'm thinking because she's supposed to have a very like layered, wavy, shaggy, like that pretty Farrah Fawcett hair, I feel like it'll just add some dimension. And I have like used like hair that didn't completely match, like platinum with more of a golden blonde before, and it's been fine. It just looks like a highlight. So that's what we're gonna use. So if I have to buy more hair, I will, but I'd rather not. And I usually buy extra blonde anyways for partial reroots. The first step here is going to be, well before we can even start rerooting, we have to remove the old hair. So we have my professional shears, which these are from cosmetology school. I bought myself another pair for when I do my own haircuts or other people's, so these are now for my dolls. And I also have like my little thing of needles and crochet hooks and this Hello Kitty pencil thing. So this is the scary part. Farrah is saying bye-bye to this nasty hair. I'm going to try to cut it as close to the scalp, and I am doing it on this cutting mat so it'll be easier to clean. Like, yeah, it's gross. Like, and it's dense because of the way it shrank. She actually doesn't have like that many hair plugs. If you look closely, you can see they're like really rooted thick each plug, but there aren't many plugs. So I don't think I'm actually gonna need a ton of hair for her, which is why I think I can get away with using extras. But if we have to order more for Farrah, then that's what we have to do. It's my fault she's like this. I think now that I've like cut so much of it down, you can really get an idea of like how sparsely rooted she is. On like Barbie dolls from the like late 80s and onward, they're usually rooted with like a lot more close together rows. In the 70s though, Barbies were rooted like this, so I'm not gonna fault Mego for that. Honestly, this is hurting my hand because her hair plugs are so packed together now because it shrank, that it's like giving me a lot of resistance when I cut, even with these really sharp shears. And I just pulled her head off like this. Normally I'd heat her up in water because that's typically the safest way to remove heads, is to soak the head in boiling water and it makes it soft. But obviously that's going to be a problem given that this shrinks up. So it's really important when rerooting, you have to remove all this stubble. So I'm going to try using a flathead screwdriver to get it up in here. I'm not sure how it's going to work. I used to use crochet hooks, but then I ended up having to use a flathead screwdriver when I rerooted a 60s baby doll because she had a huge head. Oh yeah, this is working. And I realized that it just worked a lot better because the crochet hooks can sometimes pop through the holes. Whereas you can see here, this is like yanking out the plugs pretty nicely. Her head is like a super hard plastic, so it's not the easiest to work with, but at least that means I won't have to deal with as many like tears. She's got this like extremely deep lip in her head. Like her neck hole is a lot deeper than on most Barbies, so it's kind of posing some problems. So I'm gonna continue doing this, and I'll see you once I have this all out, or we could be here a while. Alright, so this is Farrah all done. It took me a long time to get all of the hair out. You can see though, right through the holes inside her neck. So part of the problem is she has this really deep like neck lip because of how large her joint is, and the hair kind of gets trapped behind there when you're pulling it out. And even though her head is hard, and those are usually less prone to ripping, just because of how like compact the hair had shrank up, you can see there's like this hole here and then a few of them tore over here. But I am just going to use larger knots of hair for those areas like I always do. And her head's also a little bit misshapen from the way that the hair shrank down. And something very interesting that I didn't show is there was like long bits of hair that hadn't shrank down, that like, it almost looks like when a doll is thatched and they have bangs and there's like that piece that goes back and like folds over. There was like these strands that intertwined with other plugs. I had to keep trimming and cutting, and it was a lot of work, but we have her here. So I'm gonna start, let me see how much hair I have. I think I'm gonna start with the Malibu blonde because I have more of that, and I'm gonna use that in the back, and then in the front where there's like her shorter layers, we're gonna use the platinum. So if I quarter this, that should be long enough, because I am gonna add some waves in after. So I have a tutorial on how I reroot dolls. If you want like more details, it's from 2016, but it's exactly how I reroot now. It's with my African American Day to Night Barbie. So I use the knot method, but there's obviously other ways. A lot of people like the reroot tool. I do not like the reroot tool. Not for me. I don't like having to glue the hair after. So what I do, I take the length of hair I want, like so it's folded in half, like so, and I'm gonna wet this. This is gonna be really repetitious, so I'm just explaining what I'm doing here. Alright, sorry about that. Just had oil delivered and I had to go out and pay the guy. The hair that's been cut in half, and then I'm gonna knot it in the middle. Trying to keep it pretty even on both sides. And some of her holes are a little bit like larger or spaced far apart, so I want to make sure there's a little extra hair in there. But she is going to have body once I put waves, so this is what it looks like. And then the knot is going to sit in between two hair plugs, and the tension of that is going to keep the hair in, so you don't need any glue. So I'm just going to go down each hole with a large sewing needle. I usually like to start at the front for some reason. Let's start with this one. It's going to be kind of hard because her head is so rigid, and my hands are wet. Okay. And then the eye is going to come out there, and I like to just trim off like the very end so it's nice and flat and it's easy to thread through. And then pull it through, pull it up. There you go. Then I'm gonna pick the next hair plug. I actually think I'm gonna do the one behind it. Widen the hole a little bit, down the head, trim off that. Oops. Go through, pull it up, and there you have it. You have two hair plugs. You can see if I tug on one side, if I tug on the other side. And it does create kind of like natural layers as you go, because it's like your own hair. It grows out of the head the same length, but because of the point it's sitting at, it'll look shorter or longer. Yeah, so I will usually pre-knot like a whole section of hair and then just do the head, that way, fill in the head that way, and then sometimes I'll even do, if I know they have like a lot of hair, I'll do like the entire bag I'll pre-knot. We're gonna just do it, these two hanks, these two like cuttings, fill it up and see where that puts us. So obviously I wasn't going to film me rerooting every single plug. That's just super redundant and it's just very time consuming, and because her head was rather hard, there was a lot of trial and error with getting the needle through. As I got more accustomed to the like texture of her head, it wasn't as hard, but having like kind of damp hands from dampening the hair didn't help matters because it can slide around on the needle. So I filmed just a few minutes of me doing like the back of her head, and then at some point I'll switch over to the front of her head. And if you see marks on my hand, I burned myself on the side of the wood stove when I was putting a piece of wood in there, so it's like a pretty fresh burn. And then I have one that's healing right next to it, so yeah, it looks gross. I'm not a hand model, and between working on a farm and constantly burning myself on the wood stove and having Raynaud's where I am color change, it doesn't make for very aesthetically pleasing hands when working on dolls. But that's neither here nor there. Sorry she's slightly out of frame sometimes. Like I said, I was kind of struggling a bit. So how much time did this take, you might ask? Now, rerooting, it really depends on the person and how quickly you can move. I happen to be pretty efficient when it comes to really monotonous, repetitive tasks, and I have been rerooting dolls for over 10 years now. I did my first reroot in 2011, so, and I don't do them all the time, but I'd say I do them, you know, here and there enough to where I've built up, like, a pretty good muscle memory for it. So I worked on, in this clip, I worked on her for about an hour, and then I had to eat lunch and go to work, and then when I got back from work, I did about another hour worth of rerooting, and then the next day, I finished her in about an hour. So it was roughly 3 hours for, like, knotting all of these hair plugs and putting them in her head. And then if I factor in the time it took to remove her hair, like cut it off and then pull out the remaining stubble and then to set her curls and boil wash, that was maybe another hour's worth. So this doll didn't take me any more than 5 hours from start to finish, closer to around 4, besides the dry time, because she had to sit overnight to dry her curls. But some people it takes like 10 hours to do one doll. But usually for me it takes somewhere between 3 to 5, depending on the size of the head, the number of plugs, and how hard the head is. So this was the last day of rerooting, and you can see I just had a few plugs left. And I actually ended up making a few new plugs because I wanted to use up the last, like, 3 knotted pieces, because what was the point in putting them in the bag? I did have some leftover unknotted platinum hair. So when I was assessing what was left over, I definitely would not have had enough platinum to do her whole head. I would have had enough to do maybe like 85%, and then there would have been only a tiny bit of the platinum, of the Malibu blonde. So I'm glad that I made the decision to do the back in the Malibu blonde and the front in the platinum. In person it shows up less. I feel like the camera, the way like it adjusts the lighting, it looks a little bit more noticeable, but in person it's more subtle. And like I said, I often do partial reroots on dolls, so like if they have their bangs cut off or they have a stubbly section, I'll just insert a few hair plugs into those cut ones, so they look nicer, and it usually gives them like a cool money piece or like a hair streak. And I wouldn't say Farrah was really that difficult. I've rerooted way more difficult dolls. So I gave Farrah 2 really good washes with dish soap, and I also condition her and detangle her. Some people just like to go right to the setting hair phase after a reroot, like they just put curlers in and put boiling water over it. I've actually never seen anybody wash freshly rerooted hair, but I don't really watch a lot of doll content. I'm sure I'm not the only person who does this, but it's not necessarily common practice. But I just feel a certain kind of way about, like, I've been handling these plugs and dipping them in damp water, and they've been sitting on my desk, and it feels dirty to me, and I tend to overclean things, so I like to wash it. And I think when you have brand new hair and you wash it and then you boil wash it, you're not going to get, like, a better result than that. It's just beautiful. It makes for buttery hair. So because I was curling her hair, and it's not like there were any kinks in this newly rooted Saran, I did not boil wash her ahead of time. I simply scrubbed her out with dish soap, twice, rinsed her, put some conditioner on, combed through to get any like little loops I might have missed, and then rinse that out. And then I'm going to put the curls in the next clip. And then I'll boil wash her. If this was like a used doll I got, I would boil wash her hair first to make it extra, extra smooth because you get better results that way. But this is brand new hair, so I didn't feel like that was a necessary step. So this is kind of an extra step I did for Farrah. A lot of times when I reroot, I'm not too fussed about like restoring the original texture because straight hair is usually easier to care for. But Farrah's supposed to have like those classic waves that frame her face. So I used my perm rods left over from cosmetology school. I may not cut hair professionally. I decided that wasn't for me after briefly working in a salon at 19. However, all of the stuff I have from those days comes in handy for my dolls. So I use these, like, they're not my smallest ones. I think they're like my second to the biggest perm rods. And I used some end papers I got at Sally's. And I'm holding them the long way to keep any maybe potentially short bits that fall out. And I'm wrapping them away from her face. And this created like volume with some waves at the ends, but not curls. So then I put her in boiling water, which I heated up in the kettle, which is very effective, much better than using the microwave. And I'm just plopping her in the bowl and kind of checking to make sure none of the bands broke on the perm rods. This happens occasionally. They're very old. They're like, what, 15 years old now? 16? So I'm dipping them in and out, and I'm going to let her sit for a while. And then I ran her under cold tap water just to set the style, because that change in temperature helps set the set the curls. Of course, my water in the well tank gets pretty warm from the wood stove downstairs, so it wasn't as cold as it normally would be, but that's okay. And then I drizzled a bunch of diluted gel over the rollers, and I let her dry with the rollers for a while, but when I realized that it was going to take too long, I did remove them and let her dry with her hair down. So this is Farrah as she stands now. So you can see the front part where she has like that shag. That is still like balled up like it was when I boil washed her. And then the back here, you can see it's smooth. Like this fiber is smooth and like not crunchy feeling, but it looks like a porcupine because it's all up in her head. Yeah, so that is what I mean. This is what we're working with. It's very unfortunate, but we're going to help Miss Farrah. This is Farrah after. So she has waves in her hair. There isn't any like part lines because of like how swishy her hair is. And I'm not going to cut any layers in it because I feel like all of the waves kind of create the same effect, and I'd hate to cut like this really nice saran hair. And I think it sits pretty nicely. She's actually super pretty, and the like color blending is pretty subtle. So you can see like there's some golden blonde, the Malibu blonde on the bottom, and then the platinum on the top. Yeah, I think Farrah's really happy to not look like a Q-tip anymore. There will be pictures of her on my Flickr if you're interested in seeing this doll, and I do have a reroot tutorial which I'll link in the description if you want a more in-depth view of like how I reroot. I have like a specific technique, but there are plenty of other ways to reroot. And until next time, love your dolls, love yourself, and love your life.